Okay, so hey folks, welcome. I think we have a pretty short agenda today, but I'll go through the usual. As always, if anybody wants to unmute and introduce themselves, feel free to.
I can quickly say hi, I am Marko Modrinic. I am new to this SIG testing meeting. I have been working extensively with SIG release and SIG infra on migrating some of our jobs to AVS and setting up the AVS cluster that we use for testing. And I'm here today to discuss one topic that we have identified the past SIG infra meeting about the resource consumption of our jobs. So I will get to that once we get there.
Awesome. Well, I think you have the floor because I think you're the only person with the item on the agenda for today. But yeah, go for it.
Okay, thank you. So I will. Is it okay to quickly share the screen and show some stuff
Yeah.
around?
Let me go ahead and open it up. All participants, and I think go ahead.
Let me try. Okay. Okay, you should be able to see my screen now. So, as you may know, we since past few months have a new cluster that's running on AVS that we use for running Proud jobs, which is the EKS Proud build cluster. And we have been trying to identify in what way we can optimize that cluster so that the resource consumption is some let's say acceptable, let's say, numbers, and that we use some smaller instance type to for our nodes there so that we can benefit and have some savings there as well. For some concrete numbers, that cluster is spending about 20 to 25K dollars monthly, which is not that a lot, but it is also not a small amount, and we want to see what we can optimize. And for the purpose of those optimization, we started with installing kubectl recently, and you can see here on my screen that we have some kubectl installation here. It is not available to public. You need access to the cluster for that, and we still didn't figure that out. But I wanted to show some initial stuff that we found out. And the first one, like for the last 7 days, the total cost is around $4K, which is somewhat close to what we are actually having. And what is actually more boring about here is if you take a look at efficiency, we can see that CPU and RAM efficiency is about 7 and 18% respectively, which is quite bad. So we can see that requested, for example, has been, I don't know, 2012M and only 16 was used. Similar goes for RAM that we have 516 gigabytes requested, only 91 gigabytes was used. So also what I would like to show is that if I go to test pods here in allocations and uncontrolled workload, so this includes Proud job pods, we are going to see quite a lot of resources being idling and quite a lot of jobs that are not really efficient, which can be seen from, for example, these percentages here, that they're requesting a lot of resources, but those resources are not actually being used at all. And to put in some example, we have another publicly acceptable Grafana dashboard. For example, in Kubernetes, some of the jobs that we have, let's see, for example, this one, it is, for example, requesting 24 gigabytes of RAM. At some peak, it had around maybe 3.5 gigabytes, which is way more RAM than it actually needs. So what are we thinking about is that we should come up with a plan. How are we going to process this? And how are we exactly going to reduce both memory and CPU consumption of our jobs? Because at this point, we are wasting a lot of resources, and this is perhaps not needed. We can use such dashboards to try to identify jobs that are using way more resources and to try to bring that down to some amount that is actually used by jobs that can be seen on dashboards here. Um, our plan for that, actually, what we have discussed with CKH Infra, we have these bills dashboards that you can use pretty much right now. Let me see, is it the correct one? Because I'm not sure I see what I want to see. Yeah, you can see, you can select your repo here. I can leave the link in chat later and the meeting agenda, and you can check for your repos about resource consumption and if you can reduce our jobs. We wanted to send out communications to Kubernetes dev, to leads, and some potentially others mailing list. If you have idea, you can tell me. And we want to write an announcement that you should check your jobs, and that if you identify that based on this dashboard that you're using too much resources, we recommend try to adjust that down and then continue monitoring your jobs to make sure that time is not going significantly up, meaning time needed for job to finish, and that your job is not failing because it is out of memory or something like that. But we believe that this dashboard should be pretty accurate for this concrete use case. Although CPU might be hard to figure out, and we are working on a new dashboard for that, but that would be our plan. So comms to announce this and to ask folks to kindly check for their jobs based on this dashboard and to try to reduce the consumption.
Go ahead, Ricky.
So I love the dashboard. I've been using the dashboard, while working on a lot of the EKS crowd build migrations. Um, I think the difficulty with the dashboards, and something we'll run into with all the repo owners without some kind of like doctrine or incentive for them to fix this, is they're not, I guess I'm not sure how we're going to enforce or ask or incentivize the repo owners to right size their jobs. So throughout this process, a lot of it's been guesswork, a decent amount on my part to start with some resources, because obviously, as you know, coming from the default cluster where there were no resource gates, we kind of needed some kind of starting places. So absolutely, a lot of these are probably over allocated, um, per the repo or the approver's request, because they certainly would much rather have more resources than not enough resources. But I guess I imagine, and my plan has been to finish the migration and then come back and optimize. Um, going through the dashboard, I would love it if we could get the repo owners to take responsibility to come right size their jobs, but I'm not sure I see a way to incentivize or motivate those repo owners to do that.
Yeah,
I
I guess
have to.
or sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, please go ahead.
No, I was just gonna add to that. Like I also really like these dashboards. I maybe have a question about like exactly what the coverage is. Like, is it only for the EKS build cluster, or is it also for? Okay, cool. But yeah, the other thing I was going to say is I like the outline that you have about like people potentially like removing down the resource costs of their jobs. I'm also wondering to what extent that could be automated. Like not completely, but at least with a check of like, hey, we determined that running your thing 10 times with a lower resource limit actually still lets it complete within the same time or something like that. And here's like the change to make in order to set those resource limits, like a PR. I'm wondering how much like that might make it a lot easier for people to just opt in on like, hey, you'd be helping save the project some like infrastructure costs, and like here's like a better efficiency that we see from like switching the jobs over.
Yeah, and that was kind of gonna that's really good segue into kind of my next point is, do Marco, do you know if we expose Prometheus as opposed to just Grafana?
No,
what,
only Grafana.
so could we expose Prometheus? I guess one thing I'm thinking is could we create a script or a tool or something that'll go out and scrape Prometheus to kind of get exactly those metrics that Michelle was talking about, because the dashboard's fantastic, but there's a lot of needle in a haystack through the dashboards to find where the inefficiencies are, unless KubeCost does that. Do you know if KubeCost has a way to say like this specific job or this specific repo efficiency is extremely low?
It might be possible to make it work, something like that. This is one thing that we thought. And the another thing is exactly what you said. We thought about creating a report based on the data we have in Prometheus that we can share, maybe some sort of spreadsheet or something like that, that folks can check if their job is on that list and how inefficient it is. And that based on that. What we actually thought about, but we are not sure how good idea is maybe we could run some sort of webhook in front of some of those inefficient pods, and then like provide a list of pods, and for those list of pods reduce the amount of resources requested and limited, so that we can actually see if anything is going to change without users having to interact. But I am not sure how such a thing might not be transparent, to put it that way. So we are still discussing, but definitely having let's say, some sort of report that folks can check without having to go to dashboard might be helpful quite a bit.
Yeah, I feel like even just a temporary run of like one time, hey, we ran this without necessarily needing to put webhooks in front would be like sufficient as well. I don't know to what extent that's actually like possible, but basically carving out a bit of extra resources temporarily to like start running some jobs, especially ones that are like particularly inefficient, and just like seeing if the resource consumption can go down in those.
Yeah, then we can try to prepare a cloud report, something like cloud usage report for the EKS cluster, and then try to post it here, maybe for some feedback. And then I guess probably it would be better to wait for the new year to try to share announce. I agree with what you said here, is that we probably don't have a good way to motivate folks to do this. So we are depending on folks taking time to do it because we nicely ask them. And I'm not really sure that this is a way to fix it, besides eventually some of us or asking some contributors if they are interested to go to the list once we have such a list and try to reduce it if they want to try to contribute something similar what we did for migrating jobs.
Yeah, and similarly, I'm absolutely happy to go through and work on right sizing a lot of these jobs, because again, a lot good amount of this is call my fault for we had to start somewhere. So I'm absolutely happy to take on the work of right sizing these jobs. But it'll, even for me, it'll be a lot easier if we have a report or some kind of like tool or actionable set of jobs and recommendations, or these are the extremely inefficient ones, biggest bang for the buck sort of list, compared to me going through each one of these dashboards and kind of needle in a haystack, because that's what I'm running into even now towards the tail end of the migration. Is I'm still like trudging through the all of the jobs and still trying to find good ways to identify which jobs can still be migrated.
Yeah, something like that. My colleague is working on something like this. He has some proof of concept with Grafana that he can actually have a dashboard where he's going to show a specific job and how much, with some graphs, like how much of the resource consumption is underutilized. I sadly don't have it yet here in the public dashboard, but as soon as I have it, I'm going to post the link in the our SIG-Testing public channel, and then you folks can take a look and see if something like that is usable.
Heck yeah. I guess my other thing would be, I think Antonio actually talked about this from last meeting where we were talking about some items for like to encourage folks to contribute to on SIG testing. I know this one's more like SIG Kate's infra, as well as possibly SIG testing, but like I don't know if we have an issue tracking that more formally. If there is one tracking, like I think the request was more around like having more visibility into or at least part of the request, I think, was having more visibility into stuff like the resource consumption and whatnot. So I think this isn't like the exact thing that Antonio was talking about, because Antonio was talking about like very broad sense of like health and resources and whatnot. But this would be like, what am I trying to say? If we don't have an issue outlining like this, and then also like trying to like whittle down the resource consumption, then that would be great to have. And if there is one, I would love to see a link to it, because I may also be able to contribute some time.
Sounds good. I think we can create an issue once we have the report, because we could do something like when we did for the jobs migration, where we listed concrete repositories and jobs that needed to be migrated. As soon as we have a report, we can create issue and like provide the checkbox or something like that, and you can volunteer to take. I guess what is going to need most of attention for SIG testing is Kubernetes jobs, like those in Kubernetes/Kubernetes, because there are jobs there as well that are using a lot of resources that are requesting a lot of resources that are not actually used. So this is perhaps where SIG testing should be. Let's say that input from SIG testing there is going to be mostly beneficial, because yeah, these jobs might be a little bit more sensitive than other jobs.
I can see that, yeah. And yeah, I think that's where like automation to like figure out which ones we can like reduce fairly safely with some amount of like verifying that that's actually true would be like super useful. Yeah, good.
Similarly, is there a target efficiency that we want to shoot for, or that's kind of acceptable from the SIG infra side? You know, it's certainly 100% efficiency is, you know, ideal in a perfect world, but I think we want to leave a little bit of overlap for, you know, changes in the infrastructure, changes in the jobs, so that we don't kill all of our jobs off of maybe a significant change, right? So do we want to target like and again, right now we're at like 7%, so there's, you know, a big range. But do we want to, you know, initially, just to kind of put numbers to it, aim for like a 65-75% efficiency? Is that too low? What do you guys kind of think on that?
I'm almost wondering if it needs to be like even lower than that, because I feel like usage is going to be tracking the usage over the lifetime of the job, and I think there's a lot of times where like CPU or whatnot is not necessarily being made use of, even though you need like that certain amount to make sure that the job doesn't take a very long time. Like,
yeah, that's a really good point.
I agree that like I was thinking some of those things that are like 1% or 3%, and that seems like far too low, but I think 65 or 70 might be a little much to expect over the lifetime of the job, depending on how the job works.
I didn't think too much about it, but maybe I would say that we should try for maybe 20 to 30% of what is job using. So what is job using reported by those metrics, plus maybe 30% to have some spare room for, I don't know, any hiccups or anything like that. As you said, CPU might be the worst one to determine, because Yeah, if you get memory wrong, eventually it's going to get OM killed, and that's it. But if you get CPU wrong, yeah, that's harder to determine because jobs is going to go to work slower. It is not going to fail in most
Yeah.
of cases. So that one is going to be hard. But for now, I would say that we try to focus on extreme cases where like CPU is very underutilized, and then
Yeah.
go to other cases where it might, yeah, where it is not that easy to determine. So it would be like those jobs that are heavily underutilizing CPU, then memory usage, then back to other jobs that are there and there, to call them like that.
Got it. Yeah, I agree. Um, just thinking out loud for CPU utilization, do we know what's more efficient, whether we have from a cost standpoint, whether we have a job that takes more resources or that takes longer to run? Um, I
So I
guess,
shared one example and the second one. So we can see the first example, for example, that you have a job that is taking 10 CPUs and it's barely actually using 2 CPUs. On the other side, we have the lead job, which is actually always trying to use more CPU than it is actually requested and limited.
yeah,
So we actually have both cases.
but yeah. So for the latter one, the second example, if we gave that job more CPU, theoretically it would still take up, say we bumped it from, what's it at now? 5. So we doubled it, bumped it to 10. It'll still take those 10 CPU, but it'll shorten the run length, right? So we'll, instead of taking, 30 minutes to run, maybe it takes 15 minutes to run. Is there any cost efficiencies there that we should be aware of or we should be prioritizing?
I think that we should prioritize runtime when it is possible because we don't want for folks to wait, I don't know, 1 hour if they can wait 30 minutes or something like that, even like 15 minutes instead of 30 and stuff like that. We want to optimize for runtime when possible and when it isn't insanely expensive. So in this concrete case, the second one, it would be helpful to try to increase the CPU time and the CPU limit and see if it is going to bring any. It's mostly like going to reduce the runtime. It's just the matter of how much it is. So I guess such cases are up to people working on jobs to determine like when is it worth to increase and when it is worth decrease.
Yeah.
I imagine that can like time seems really important, and I think that varies between what type of job it is as well. If a post submit or something takes, or maybe not even a post submit, like a periodic takes a little bit longer than like normal, that's probably somewhat okay. Like 30 to 35 or 40 minutes is not that big a deal in the big scheme of things, but a pre-submit taking like 5 to 10 minutes now would be like a much worse experience.
Yeah, I agree with that too. Like ideally, for example, if you have to increase the CPUs for 5 to gain about 1 minute, that's probably not worth it. But if you gain 10 or 15 or 20 minutes, it's definitely worth it.
Especially if it's like the long running one that's making like it's the last one to finish or something for pre-submits.
Yeah.
Actually, that would be a good. That's another different project I think that would also be good to check is like, can we add resources elsewhere to like speed things up? Um.
Yeah,
Anyways,
that could be other side of the report. Like if we see that some jobs are overutilizing, then we can see how we can increase the resource consumption, the resource limits in this case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
I will see then about providing some sort of actionable that's going to include both type of information so that we can actually see what we need to take, like to try to include all of jobs and calculate some sort of efficiency for them. So yeah.
That would be awesome. I guess
Okay, then
oh sorry.
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna ask, how I guess how is the info being pulled for this specifically so that like how possible would it be to do this for like some of the other build clusters as well?
That's sort of a hard question. I imagine that for default cluster, it's kind of impossible because we don't have access and it's running the old monitoring stack that is unmaintained basically.
Oh,
So,
okay.
but we have that GKE cluster that's community owned that should run the newer stuff and that we might gain access to. So I think that one might be possible to try to build something similar to this.
Okay. So the main thing that might potentially be blocking it is for some of the other build clusters so that no access or it's not migrated over to community management, so there is no access, or the monitoring stack needs an upgrade so that it's actually like possible to pull this.
Yeah.
Okay. That I think would be great to note as well. Like if that's a blocker, then that also sounds like a worthwhile project to have it for like covering all of the build clusters that are like important. Because this looks great, and I think having it for parity for the other build clusters would be great as well.
Yeah, we can look into that probably the next year. So
Yeah,
if we manage to come up with something, it will be definitely great.
no, it sounds like that should be part of plans for like migrating the Browse stack to community management next year. Because like this is a great one to point out. Like this would be a good benefit.
Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, I will keep you all updated on once we have the cloud report, on also we have some better dashboards that is actually going to tell which jobs are problematic, so we don't have to like go through each job like one by one. And also we will be working on preparing some communications based on what we come up. We will ask you folks if you want to review, so we will keep you updated. SIG-Testing channel, nothing to worry about.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks, Marco.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Thank you all for the input. It's very appreciated.
Thanks for presenting. This is awesome. I think with that, that's the last bit of the agenda for today. So is there anything else that folks wanted to like talk about or comment on? All right, sounds good. So thanks folks for joining. This was a really cool discussion, and yeah, looking forward to seeing more on this. All right, take care, everyone.
Bye bye.